and welcome here to the home of the Undisqualified Champion and of course Ferrari's biggest fan, as we are reporting directly here from the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, the home of the round 7, really round 5, of the 2026 FIA Formula 1 World Championship, but more importantly, round 3 of this amazing 2026 Formula 1 Sprint Championship. And of course, it's a lot of sprinting here in the new all-innovative Formula 1 2026. And with the third sprint of the season, we are now already at a halfway stage in terms of the sprints, even though it feels barely as though we just started racing. So over here in this exclusive sprint reaction, we will tell you using this Scuderia Ferrari Red Retina. I made, all about this pulsating, very, very exciting sprint, which I'm sure all of the Canadian fans must have absolutely been loving it over there. And the beautiful sunny Ile Notre Dame, obviously the Notre Dame island built specifically over here in 1970 to host the export and sporting events like the Formula 1 Grand Prix and now the Sprint Grand Prix as well. And yeah, what an exciting race that we definitely could have won, because there was a lot of action, a lot of fighting between the teammates, between the drivers, and I thought I really greatly enjoyed. And here from the perspective of the Ferrari's biggest fan, with probably one of the finest fashions for this 2026 season, the only long-sleeved one, because obviously even though it was still very sunny, you could see that the temperature barely reached 20 degrees Celsius, which also meant that, for example, the track surface was a little bit colder. So again, there was not as much of a grip, especially off the line, which had a big repercussions on who eventually won the sprint. So here we will tell you exactly how it went, and then we will take a look at how the race finished, who has won the sprint, which you of course already know, and then we will take a look at the drivers and the constructors table, and we will also talk about the sprint drivers and constructors tables, because if Formula 1 is not gonna be doing it, yeah, the Switzerland champion, well, that's right. So over here, where to start. So you've seen me obviously flying around the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, especially with that red hot light, but you will have to wait until round 10 for that Canadian Grand Prix. But hey, I hope you enjoyed the pole position at another circuit that is named after Ferrari legend, the son obviously and the founder, the Enzo e Gino Ferrari, obviously, as I've just gotten the Imola Grand Prix pole position. So yeah, it was essential for us that we would have been more competitive in the sprint qualifying, and actually we did a pretty good job, especially with Lewis Hamilton, who actually has won here 7 times. Michael Schumacher, my childhood hero, has won here 6 times, and I won half of Michael Schumacher's races so far, but they might of course change. So definitely stay tuned to our amazing YouTube channel. So with Hamilton being immediately off the pace and Leclerc being a couple of tenths off, he was really our best hope, and it looked really good in SQ1 sprint qualifying 1, also in SQ2 sprint qualifying 2. You obviously only have 12 and 10 minutes on the medium tires to deliver the best lap pace, and Hamilton was obviously even leading it and did what I would do, always try to come out even when Fernando Alonso hit the barrier in the sprint qualifying, to make sure that he gets as good at the current track conditions as possible, because I figure out in qualifying it's maybe not always the best idea to just go once or twice, because again you can always export the limits in this turn, then you put it all together at the end of the sprint qualifying 3. But sadly it didn't happen there for Hamilton. For a while it looked as though he was always able to pick even the Mercedes, right, to the P1. So absolutely brilliant performance. We were really loving it, and so was he. With Leclerc, obviously we knew that this would be one of the tracks that he would struggle, and it was the case with the new generation cars in 2026 as well. Leclerc did struggle here, but again I was happy that he incrementally has gotten better and better, because again these are the races, especially considering that heading into this sprint, the third sprint of the season, Leclerc was actually tied on points with the winners of the previous 2 sprints, the Chinese sprint George Russell, and of course the Miami sprint, which was the current reigning champion Lando Norris. So all on 13 points. So you can see how exciting it could be if we had that sprint table. But of course it was all about the championship battle, right? The Mercedes, they brought the upgrades, other teams including us, we didn't, and I think, the rear wing is really, really helping us. This is also the last race before we will be able, to upgrade our, engine, especially the whole powertrain, and especially, when Mercedes engines, so that includes obviously Mercedes and I believe also McLaren's and obviously Williams and Alpine, but they don't feature in the title battles. So that will be very important once the compression ratio of the pistons, will be measured at the racing speed, where we expect, that there will be definitely a slide, but it could be up to, I heard, 30 to 50 horsepower that Mercedes could be, for example, missing. So that again, could easily catapult us, to dominate Formula 1 from Monaco onwards. So we will see. On these long straights, we expected something similar like in Australia to happen. The track again, being pretty much the same length as the Australian race, the Albert Park circuit, and going down almost, half a second to about a second, about 8/10, we were only 3/10 down. Crucially, when the race started though, Antonelli was then able, just like George Russell, to pull these crucial 3/10 on Hamilton. We were hoping that if Lewis was obviously starting second, that would be like slam dunk, that he would be going for his second sprint victory in the scarlet red Ferrari colors. But eventually, he was there in about in the third place, and then both McLaren just pinned him by really hundreds, thousands of a second. So that was a little bit heartbreaking, because starting fifth and obviously Leclerc sixth, looking out the third row is not what we wanted. We wanted to be, right behind the Mercedes, because they would have the bad starts. Especially, the run-up to the first turn is ever so short, even though we will see when I'm going to be starting over here at the Canadian Grand Prix, if I'm going to be qualifying on the pole position, if I can manage, to keep up the place, unless you get some big wheel spin off the line, obviously it is relatively easy to hold the position. And when the 5 red lights went out, after obviously, that unfortunate, delay, right, that we of course had, which I don't think they should do the pre-restart procedure anymore, because Mercedes for the first time this season has managed to get off the line just fine. Took them really a sixth of the season to figure it out. But yeah, Russell, pretty good start, so I don't see any need over here, to be waiting so long on the grid, because it only helps especially the silver arrows cars. And Antonelli was also able to defend from the McLarens, and we were not able, to really challenge them. But Hamilton did a great job positioning the car pretty well, so that he was able to overtake Piastri around the outside of the turn 2. And then, Mercedes immediately, started to pull back, and you had a first real championship battle over there. So for us, that was obviously gonna be bad, but the victory was still possible at this point. So obviously we wanted to qualify third and fourth, or get a pole position, get a second place. I believe that Hamilton would have been then running second, perhaps even first, even though the Russell start was pretty impressive. So then what happened was that Antonelli reeled in Russell, and just like Leclerc reeled in Russell in Melbourne, it proved to be the case that an overtake is quite powerful, especially the slipstream is also quite powerful, and us being so good, over the slow speed corners, that would have given us a great opportunity, even though Hamilton was actually never really able to attack Norris for the third place. And very quickly it evolved into the races of the two Mercedes fighting for a lead. And we were loving what was happening, because obviously we don't like when the Ferrari drivers are fighting, but just like last year in Canada, when it was the McLaren, the orange boys crashing, here it was the silver boys crashing. And at kind of a similar turn, Antonelli was finally able to get a good slipstream, especially that wall of the champions. Some drivers, including me, will be a little bit cautious. He didn't find the corner. Antonelli, being a teenager, went right for it, and great move around the outside. And a big talking point, as he was really side by side with George Russell, but being really off the racing line, Russell pushed him wide. There was a contact. Sadly, it didn't result in any of them going out, but I have to say, this is a great from Antonelli, and him being Italian, I mean, the Ferraris, we are probably going to be preparing the contract soon. If he keeps up these performances, it's a huge change from his first season, I have to say. And here Russell, I think he must be genuinely worried. Of course, Russell was entitled to take the corner, he did, but I also felt that he should have definitely left Antonelli more space. The worst thing was obviously with the Toto Wolff, one of the worst bosses, obviously, again, just trying to stay relevant, telling Antonelli to pretty much be quiet, but the emotions are running high, right? Russell, this is just a sprint. He doesn't need to fight him so hard over here, especially, you could see that it resulted in them almost losing the easy one too, right? Because they clearly were still, the class of the field with the new upgrades. So, then it brought Norris and also Hamilton into the play, and especially, the second attempt by Antonelli just 3 laps later, which I believe was over-optimistic, but again, great move. I mean, this is what you're doing in, for example, the simulation games. So like in the F1 26 that we cannot wait to try coming up, very soon in just, less than a fortnight, in 10 days. So definitely stay tuned for some of the fastest laps. It's unusual that he tried to overtake, into the chicane before the hairpin, because it's really difficult to get on the traction heading out of obviously one of the toughest corners that I described in that hot lap. But Russell, I believe, maybe got a bit of a wheel spin, but of course track being very bumpy there and being on the dirty side, there was pretty much no grip, like you can see in the exclusive Formula 1 highlights. Antonelli had a big look up, went over the grass, bounced even a little bit, crucially lost the position to Norris that he then couldn't recover. But Hamilton then had a chance to perhaps overtake, and if Norris then attacked Russell, right, and with Hamilton being in third position, that could have easily resulted maybe in them fighting, clashing, and we would have been the winners. But yeah, not starting on a pole position hurt us, but we enjoyed that silver battle, and 10 years on from that epic 2016 battle between Nico Rosberg, one of our favorite drivers, great man living in Monaco. We basically sporting his haircut, and obviously he learned from our childhood hero Michael Schumacher against Lewis Hamilton, the current 7-time champion driving for Scuderia Ferrari. We have Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the young Italian superstar, against George Russell, obviously a well-accomplished F2 winner and a winner of half a dozen of the Grand Prix. So it's going to be interesting. Russell a bit lucky over here, but once again you could see that the first position is not where you really want to be. So the Grand Prix is going to be epic, but if it's going to be raining, that will bring a new variation which we so far haven't had this season. So then Antonelli almost recovered the position from Norris, also tried to go around the outside, but Albrecht himself, this time being smarter, he took the avoiding route and then basically didn't have a chance to attack the reigning champion. Norris bit lucked, I believe, into this position because he almost messed up his final lap in the SQ3 and had to go for a second run and lucked into the P3. Otherwise he could have easily finished in the P6. For Lewis, I think it was a real heartbreak because the cars, they kind of pulled a gap of the 5 seconds as Piastri was very, very tough, heading into the final chicane and basically, bogged Hamilton down. Leclerc was then able to overtake Lewis. Sadly, Leclerc then didn't get Piastri down the line. There was only a 10th of a second, but I believe, that bodes well, that we are actually, able to have a go at the McLarens. But clearly, we have to start higher and we have to be 1 and 2 because I believe, if we are first and second, we will be able, to really put in a great race, right? But will that happen? We do seem to be still a little bit down on the power, but that beautiful rear wing, great innovation, just like the seamless gearbox, for example, by Scuderia Ferrari, is working really well, but sadly, yeah. This is the way it is. So let's take a look at how this exciting sprint, the first ever here in Canada, has finished. So here you can see George Russell taking a lead in the sprint championship over here. Of course, he is still well behind, 18 points in the drivers championship, and winning for Mercedes ahead of Lando Norris, who eventually had to defend very hard from Andrea Kimi Antonelli, his first sprint podium of the season. And then fourth, Oscar Piastri, who got pretty lucky, could have easily been a 6th place for him, finishing just a 10th ahead of Charles Leclerc. Our Monaco Springs and Lewis Hamilton put in a really great performance, albeit still 10 seconds down, but I think that will make him even hungrier for the main event over here, so we really cannot wait to see that. Then we have Max Verstappen. It's great to see Red Bull being off the pace in the 7th place. Arvid Lindbergh then got the final point over here. Again, a great performance by the rookie. 9 was, then for Alpine Franco Colapinto, and then Carlos Sainz for Williams, but in the sprint, only the top 8 get the points. So, heading into this weekend after Miami, Leclerc with Russell and Norris were tied on 13 points, and then you had Piastri on 10 points in the sprint championship, and then of course you had Hamilton on 8 points, Antonelli on 7th. Surprisingly, he would only be 6th in the standing despite leading the overall standings over here because he had poor sprints so far. And then Verstappen on 4 points, and then we had the Behrman, with the Gasly, of course, and Lawson scoring a point. So now George Russell is leading with 21 points the sprint championship. Lando Norris is then second on 20 points. Charles Leclerc is with 17 points in the third place. So you can see I'm just doing it here with my grade man. Oscar Piastri will keep the fourth place. He's on 15 points. Fifth, Andrea Kimi Antonelli on 13 points, and Lewis Hamilton on 11 points, being sixth. Max Verstappen is then seventh, where he just finished in the sprint table. On 6 points he would be there, and Arvid Lindbergh would be joined by Liam Lawson, Pierre Gasly, and Oliver Behrman on the single point. So over here, this is how it finished. So everybody, let's take a look over here at the Drivers' Championship. So that obviously is the only official one that we have, and you can see that Andrea Kimi Antonelli is leading with 106 points, but George Russell with a nice score of 88, has closed out the gap, but it will be really all about the main event. Again, for Russell, he should stem his authority, but Antonelli's pace is impressive. Charles Leclerc keeps the third place with 63 points, and hopefully he can deliver a good performance over here, as we will be obviously heading here, maximize it, fantastic, as Charles Leclerc will be then heading into one of the toughest races, I think, of his season. Then we have Lando Norris, the reigning champion for McLaren, on 58 points, fourth place. Fifth is Lewis Hamilton for Ferrari on 54 points. Sixth, Oscar Piastri, McLaren, 48 points. Seven, Max Verstappen, Red Bull, 28 points. Eight, we then have Oliver Behrman, Haas, 17 points. Nine, Pierre Gasly, Alpine, 16 points. 10, Liam Lawson, Racing Bulls, 10 points. 11 is then Franco Colapinto, Alpine, 7 points. So look at how he's coming alive. 12, Arvid Lindbergh, Racing Bulls, 5 points. 13, unlucky Isaac Hadjar, his Red Bull expired. He's 13, unlucky, 13 on 4 points. 14, Carlos Sainz Williams, 4 points. 15, Gabriel Bortoleto, Audi, 2 points. 16, Oliver Behrman, Haas, 1 point. 17, Alexander Albon, Williams, 1 point. Still without a point, but showing great performance in Canada. 18, Nico Hülkenberg, Audi, 0 points. 19, Valtteri Bottas, Cadillac, 0 points. 20th, Sergio Perez, Cadillac, 0 points. 21st, Fernando Alonso, Aston Martin, 0 points. Can homeboy Lance Stroll, who is last 22nd in the standing for Aston Martin, 0 points, do something? Probably not. Again, Aston Martin, huge disappointment still so far. So this is the constructors table for the 2026-2026 season. So Mercedes leading it at the moment quite comfortably with 194 points. We are second on 117 points, and McLaren third on 106 points. Fourth is then Red Bull on 32 points. Fifth, Alpine, 23 points. Sixth, Haas, 18 points. 7 is then Racing Bulls, 15 points. 8 is Williams, 5 points. 9, Audi, 2 points. The new team Cadillac, 10th on 0 points. 11, Aston Martin on 0 points. So here, in terms of the sprint championship, so for the constructors, so as we can see over here, it is quite interesting, but if I calculated directly from my head right over here, yes, McLaren actually should be leading here with the 35 points, if I'm not mistaken, and yes, they should be ahead of Mercedes, because obviously with Antonelli's 14 points, yes, so actually it would be Mercedes leading 35 points, and then it would be McLaren 35 points, so tied for the lead. You can see how exciting the sprint championship could be there, and for us as Scuderia Ferrari, obviously Leclerc having 17 points and Hamilton having 11, we would be on 28 points, and then courtesy obviously of Verstappen, we would have Red Bull on 6 points. And then we would have Racing Bulls being 5th on 2 points, and 1 point for Haas and 1 point for Alpine, right, in the 6th and 7th respectively. And then we would have obviously 8th. Yes, I believe that would then be Williams on 0 points, 9 Audi 0 points, 10 Cadillac 0 points, 11 Aston Martin 0 points. So this is the constructors table, this is the drivers table, and obviously our winner over here being George Russell, his second sprint victory. Congratulations to him. I think he has shown he's a tough competitor, but again he will be definitely worried by the pace of Antonelli. And yeah, everybody, again, very soon we will have the Grand Prix, so definitely stay tuned. We will of course be racing the Ferrari, the Imola Grand Prix, and the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, so definitely check out as I try to convert my second ever pole position at that magnificent circuit into the victory, because last year the race 7, of course, was the Imola, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. I got the Ferrari Grand Prix, not the Canadian Grand Prix, but again, definitely you will see it, so keep on supporting us as we marching towards that elusive 5th Formula 1 World Championship for Scuderia Ferrari, something that only Michael Schumacher has achieved. And yeah, we definitely hope that the rain will bring us some good luck. Hamilton has won here 7 times. If he want to be an 8th champion, he's got to get the 8th Canadian Grand Prix victory. We definitely know that qualifying well and leading the pack is absolutely the key over here, as Russell has proved, even though the slipstream is so powerful, and you can definitely overtake here at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, which the Gilles Villeneuve himself, a Ferrari legend and a brilliant overtaker, would be very proud of. So I hope you guys enjoyed this exclusive 3rd sprint reaction. We are now at the midway stage of the sprint seasons, only the ones in Great Britain and Netherlands and Singapore coming up. And now all I can say is that we cannot wait for the qualifying, we cannot wait for the Grand Prix proper. Canada always throws in great races. We will also be chasing our 4th victory over here, our 2nd at Imola in our concurrent season. So wish us a good luck. And now, in our brand new fashion, say it with me: we love racing, we love Formula 1, we love Ferrari, Forza Ferrari!